Hello, everyone. Today, I'm going to recommend a fantasy novel where the female protagonist is chased by demons into a forest. At this moment, the male lead, Adranus, transforms into a wolf to save her. The female protagonist thinks she's finally safe, only to later discover that the male lead is actually the same person as the werewolf king, Eirik. Moreover, Eirik has been covering up this secret. What's going on with these two? Don't worry, it'll take you to find out. Chapter 37. The memory faded as swiftly as it had appeared, leaving me gasping for air. The vivid recollection of my first encounter with Adranus felt so real, as if I had relived it entirely. I remembered the power he had taught me to harness, but the specifics eluded me. My determination, a trait that had always defined me, surged forward. I knew I could use this power to escape, to destroy them all, just as Adranus had said. I just needed to remember how. Another bolt of lightning struck, this time mere yards from the platform. The proximity of the strikes sent waves of heat washing over my skin, and I had to fight back the urge to scream. I couldn't afford a panic attack now, no matter how desperately one threatened to overwhelm me, forcing my eyes away from the scorched earth. I focused on the light emanating from my fingertips, feeling its familiar tug in my chest. For once, I needed this power for myself, even if it seemed reluctant to save me. The energy flickered upward, licking at my hands before disappearing into the machine. I needed more. I had to overpower the pull of the metal, and time was running out. Closing my eyes, I took a deep breath and thought of Eirik, the one person my soul craved most. I recalled how he looked when they returned from the 𝐊𝐢𝐬𝐬 Islands unconscious, bloodied, and dying in the middle of the castle. The memory made my heart ache, my chest clenching painfully. The power within me surged in response, rushing from my chest to my fingertips. It shared my desire to save him. Always him, regardless of what happened to me. My earlier headache intensified, and my vision blurred. I felt awful but strained to watch as the light flowing from my hands grew until it overpowered the machine's absorption. The energy surged over my hands and up my forearms as thunder roared louder. The ruby against my chest, a gift from Eirik, warmed in tandem with the storm's fury. Lightning was coming, I could feel it. Panic rose within me as the light finally reached the bindings. It's eating away at the leather. If I didn't escape in time, it'd be toast literally. When my right arm tore through the badly burnt leather, relief flooded me, but it was short-lived. 𝐊𝐢𝐬𝐬 shouted something below, and light began to illuminate the sky, choking back a scream. I hurriedly freed my other arm before tugging at the strap around my stomach, my determination to survive and protect Eirik driving me forward. This was so not good. Owl rose in the distance, one that shook through every inch of me. It was so loud, so terrifying, that the storm even seemed to pause for a moment. Even the shadows surrounding the clearing stilled, their dark forms slithering in and out of focus. Then they grew, quickly swirling in an even larger, more vicious mass. That panic rose in my chest again. 𝐊𝐲𝐬𝐬 coming. I vaguely heard 𝐊𝐢𝐬𝐬𝐬 shout as the lightning started to build once again. Yes, Adranus was coming. I could practically feel my heart swell in my chest, and my head grew foggier than before. He died. After so long. After he left me in the heavens. In the cave, he was almost here. A relief of that knowledge was short-lived as the clearing began to fill with light once again. I went back to undoing the last strap as fast as I could, those hyperventilating pants starting in my chest. They didn't help my headache either. It took a lot more effort to undo the last buckle than I wished, but I undid the strap before the lightning stuck. I just didn't make it off the platform. The slam into the machine in the exact spot I had been tied to. It's bright, hot energy literally flinging me from the entire platform. I screamed. White. Hot pain shooting through my body as I soared through the howling wind and barely cold air. Screamed as I landed yards away, my side hitting the hard, cold ground and jarring every bone in my body. Agony shot through me, straight from my side to my spine and head. I gasped, my head falling back to the damp ground as stars swam in front of my eyes. I tried to swallow my sob as the shadows that had parted from my landing began to circle in a flesh, hungry mass around me. I heard 𝐊𝐿𝐼𝐬 shout somewhere behind me, probably furious, but I was too busy trying to sit up to care. The howl sounded again, its dark, murderous roar shaking through me more than the impact had. It was closer now, nearly here. He was nearly here. The shadows didn't pause this time but grew in ferocity as they began to swirl in a massive cyclone. Those red eyes and shark teeth all molding into one. Colossal. Black mass. Adranus. I breathed heavily against the pain ringing through me and placed my bruised palms against the hard ground in some form of balance. Then there was a mass of howling reverberating through the clearing and my stall. Their vicious, blood-curdling sounds roaring over the storm now. I gasped in horror as they all reached my ears, my eyes widening as my heart clenched in fear. I knew those howls, knew the leader they followed. Oh God, he had found us. Eirik and the others were coming for me, and they were all going to die. No, 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 no. I gasped as I pushed against the ground and pulled myself slowly to my feet. Pain shot through my side and up my back, but I tried to ignore it as I looked hurriedly around the darkness. Lightning had stopped striking the machine, but I could see it brewing overhead once again. I had to get Eirik away from this place before those demons killed him, before he got caught up in whatever mess was between Adranus and 𝐊𝐿𝐼𝐬. But I couldn't see anything over the dark mass whirling around me. Couldn't even see the machine or 𝐊𝐼𝐼𝐬. I wanted to scream North's name, to tell him not to try and save me, to go back to the castle. But there was no use in trying to yell over the storm. I held my hand over my eyes as the violent wind flung dirt and natural debris across the dark expanse, and that massive black cloud started to break away into individual shadows once again, shadows with 4 legs, barbed tails, long fangs, and red eyes. I gulped. We were all going to die. I took staggering steps backward, the pain in my side shooting down my leg as I stumbled away from the demons. But they knew I was there, watching my every move, watching their next meal. My eyes widened in horror as one turned towards me, the others all stomping off in the direction of the oncoming wolves. I gulped and staggered further back. A vicious growl pulled from the creature's lips. Nice demon thingy. I slowly held my hand up in front of me, as if that would stop it from advancing. Right. It bared its fangs, its red eyes glowing in the darkness as the talons on its feet sank into the ground. It stalked towards me, hunting its prey. Dying by lightning didn't seem so bad at the moment. 𝐼𝐧𝐼𝐬 tastes good. I pleaded, as if it could understand anything I was saying. I promise, you won't enjoy eating me. But it ignored me and started that deadly circle most predatory creatures did to their future meals. The gold power had disappeared the minute I was flung from the platform, and it made me want to scream. Figures my own soul didn't care that I was about to die. Then again, maybe it knew that was a bad thing. Eirik was here somewhere. I could feel it. And if I died, he would know. He wouldn't have reason to fight them anymore. He would leave. He would be okay. I let out aloud, splitting scream as the demon lunged at me, its fangs reflecting the lightning striking down at the same time, and its talons poised to tear into my flesh. I threw myself to the ground and flung my arms over my head in some form of protection. Any form of protection as useless as it was, just because I knew it would save Eirik, didn't mean that I actually wanted to die. There was a loud, vicious growl from behind me, and I peeked my eyes open just in time to see a large, dark mass fly over my head and slam into the demon inches from my face. I cowled and stopped the other scream that tore from my lips as the new creature ripped viciously into the demon, sending black wisp, like smoke and dews in every direction. I knew who it was though, could feel that heart-stopping tug in my chest from before, from every memory and dream I had ever had of him. His wolf was massive, far larger than any I had seen before, and even more terrifying than the apparition of him in the cave had been. Adranus stepped back from the mutilated demon at his paws, raised his head to the storm in the sky and let out aloud. Vicious. 𝐾𝐞𝐬. The ferocity of it actually made my stomach twist. I could only sit on the cold, damp ground and stare at him wide-eyed as he lowered his head and shook off the black ooze coating his dark fur. There was a brief pause, one the whole world seemed to share. The storm stopped raging. The demons running in full force all around us froze, and the wind no longer bit into my skin. Then he turned slowly towards me, growls slipping past his fangs as those red eyes locked with mine, and time stared again. Adranus. His name slipped past my lips on its own accord, my hands trembling against the ground as they held me from falling. The god of the moon, and all that entailed, was shaking in absolute anger before me, those red, ruby eyes glowing in fury as he continued to growl at me. There was no recognition in that stare, no hint of ease as our gazes locked. My chest felt like it was collapsing in on itself. He was so different than the Adranus I remembered, the one who only gave me soft embraces and loving smiles. But I did not fear him, even if he truly had forgotten me. He was an enemy after all. I rolled slowly onto my knees, my dress torn and ripped in every direction. Not that that mattered now. I slowly held my hand out to him, praying he would come to me, hoping beyond all hope he knew who I was. Those red eyes were hard, curious, as they flickered over every inch of my face before he slowly lowered his head and took a step towards me. A relieved smile pulled at my lips. Then that red gaze softened, and he eased slowly towards me, his large paws sinking heavily into the damp grass as thunder roared across the sky once again. My Adranus. After all this time, a demon launched out of the darkness and crashed into his large side, sharp fangs and talons tearing into black fur. He howled as the creature tore his flesh, his eyes once again ablaze in fury as he began snapping viciously at the demon on his side. No, I screeched as thick. Red blood began to pool on the ground. The gold power was back, demanding to be used. Adranus was hurt, bleeding. He needed its help, he needed my help. The two supernatural beings had rolled down a sharp dip in the clearing, their fangs and claws digging viciously into one another. I crawled unsteadily to my feet, that pain from before rearing its ugly head, as the light from the power began shining from my hands. I raced down the small hill after them, my breath leaving my lungs in painful pants as I ignored the chaos swarming around me. The wolves had finally reached the chaos, and they were everywhere, each one engaged in a deadly battle with a demon, or two. I had no idea where 𝐊𝐿𝐼𝐵 was, or Eirik, but the storm was still raging and Adranus needed help. That was all I could think about it. I had just hit the bottom of the hill when another demon caught the corner of my eye, one running straight at the two as I was. No, I screamed as the creature went straight for Adranus's exposed side, its vicious fangs snapping at his fur. An impossible, almost unbearable heat engulfed my arms, before I flung them out in front of me, the light from the power leaving my hands in a vicious wave before it slammed into the demon. There was a horrid, piercing scream, and then silence as a sickening burning smell filled the air. The demon had completely evaporated. Whoa, I mumbled as the light slowly died away, and even though the heat went with it I could still feel its phantom ache against my skin. The pain in my head came back in full force, and I staggered backward as the power disappeared. There was a sharp howl from Adranus, one that sent a piercing chill down my spine, before he finally got his massive jaw around the demon's throat. I was suddenly very lightheaded, and dizzy, oh, so very dizzy. I fell back against the hill hard. The impact jarred up my spine as I sat dazed, like blinking over at the abnormally large wolf. I watched as he tore the demons to shreds and threw what was left of it into the mass of fighting bodies. He shook out his fur again, his paw digging into the ground, before he began turning in a small circle, his head shifting slowly in every direction, looking for something. I never saw this form of him in the heavens. He was only ever a man. I knew he liked taking on the wolf when he came to the mortal realm. Knew he loved running with them every night before he knew me. They were his favorite in all creatures he held under his reign. I took that from him, took his time with them. He stopped traveling here because of me. The thought hit me out of nowhere and was more depressing than I thought. It made my head ache more than it already was. He paused when those red eyes flickered over to me, but I was falling the rest of the way to the ground to really pay attention. I rolled on my side with groan. It was hard to ignore the pain now. The gold power had sapped every ounce of energy in my body, and I just wanted to sleep. My eyes had barely closed when some cold and wet nudged my cheek, but I just wanted to swat it away as the storm thundered overhead and the carnage rained around us. A growl sounded in my ear, one as suggested against ignoring the massive being hovering over me. I let out another groan but forced my eyes open to blink up at the large wolf looming over me anyway. His eyes were hard, his lips pulled back in a small snarl, but I didn't pull away as he started to lower his snout once again. This time when the cold, wet touch brushed over my forehead, a slow, warm wave of relief spread through me. The pain in my sigh eased away, and the dizzy, sleepy feeling swamping my eyes faded. I sat up slowly and rubbed my hand over my forehead as he pulled away. Those red eyes no longer seemed furious, and although they were still hard, I could see concern swimming there. Despite the situation, it made me smile. "I'm okay. Thank you." He blinked, then stepped away slightly, that massive form of his blocking the storm from view as he crouched down beside me. It took a minute to realize what he wanted me to do, but as the lightning struck the ground once again and more demons started to notice us, I quickly grabbed onto the thick tuft of fur at his neck and pulled myself onto his back. He was soft, far more so than I was expecting. The blood and dews-like substance coating his side matted the thick fur but did not take away its beauty as what little light in the clearing reflected off its pitch black color. Figures even as animals were unearthly beautiful. He barely waited long enough for me to hold on to him before lunging to his feet and started running up the hill. The number of demons had definitely dwindled, but so had a few of the wolves. Lifeless bodies laid sprawled out across the dark clearing, freshly killed wolves turning back to their human forms, or even the demons' corpses in solid, blurred masses. I prayed we didn't cross any of the generals. I wouldn't be able to handle it if any of them died. If Eirik had died, I shook my head again, stayed-eyed, dark fur, and let out a shaky breath. No, Eirik was dead. I would have felt it. He was fine. He had to be. Adranus was headed for the clearing's edge, to the dense safety of the forest, from the danger of the storm. Hope began to rise in my chest the further from the demons we grew. Those thick trees and dark leaves I once had been so frightened of looked like as perfect as the heavens. We had gotten so close to the tree line, so incredibly close. When the demon sighed, swiped us, it caught him off guard and hit his side with such force it sent us both flying through the air. I was thrown from his back and crashed against the ground on my same hurt side from before. "You've got to be freaking kidding me." I groaned as I forced myself into a sitting position and rubbed my hurt arm. Adranus had landed beside me, a dark growl tearing from his throat as he pushed himself from the ground and shook the dirt from his fur. The demon that had crashed into us completely disappeared, leaving so soon. "You only just arrived." The deranged voice of that lunatic 𝐊𝐢𝐳 reached my ears, and I let out a strangled groan as he appeared just a few yards away. Freaking wonderful. I jumped to his feet without hesitation, and placed his large, bruised body between that freak and me, a long, vicious growl pulling from his lips. 𝐊𝐢𝐳 rolled his eyes. "Will you not face me as a man? Or has the great god Adranus really forgotten how to be one?" His voice was a mocking taunt, one the large wolf in front of me didn't take very well. I stood slowly to my feet as he began to shake, his body trembling as the muscles and tendons began to shift. My eyes widened as I watched the monstrous wolf turn slowly into a very large, muscular, and very without clothes man. It was not the time nor the place to grow all bashful, but I cowed and helped the blush that stained my cheeks. Saying he was tall would be an understatement. I had always figured Eirik to be the largest male I had ever seen, but the god of the moon beat him by far. Even in my dreams he had not seemed so massive. Then again, he was an immortal being, He towered over 𝐿𝐼𝐵𝑟𝑖us, and the build of his back alone looked stronger than the mountain itself. No mortal man, nor wolf-born, could ever appear as he did now. He truly was a god, and he was about to tear that nuisance apart. I watched in sick triumph as that snide amusement slowly left 𝐿𝐼𝐵𝑟'𝐬 gaze, and a brief flash of fear fell over his face. "Ah," he started on a meek croak, before clearing his throat and starting again. "So you have not become as ignorant as I thought." Adranus growled, those thick muscles straining as he rolled his shoulders. My stomach fluttered at the sight. "Get to the trees. Immerse." I jumped slightly as his voice reached my ears, and only caused that blush staining my cheeks to grow. Good God, Immerse. There was more important matters at stake. Not without you. He turned his head enough to glance over at me, those red eyes hard as stone. His face was exactly as I dreamt it, as I remembered. Perfectly sculpted, sharp angles and high cheekbone. He looked so much like Eirik it hurt. Eirik. I needed to find him, needed to make sure he was okay. I didn't care about the inner turmoil between him and Adranus raging inside me. I just had to make sure they would both be okay. That was a request. I gulped at the look he shot me, at the hard planes of his face and the dark color of his hair. No matter how unearthly, eternally beautiful he was, he could be frightening when he wanted. I know. I stammered and glanced around frantically, my fingers running furiously through my tangled hair as the storm continued to scream overhead. "But I'm not leaving without you. And Eirik. I needed. I'm afraid neither is possible. I promised the little bitch and that soul of hers to Lord Harry, and 𝐿𝐼𝐻 expecting me to deliver." My breath caught in my throat at the vicious snap of 𝐿𝐼𝐵𝑟'𝐬's words, at the horror and dread clouding his putrid eyes. Adranus growled and stepped back towards me, his large hand reaching behind him. "I will destroy you both before he gets anywhere near her." I closed the distance between us quickly and grabbed onto his large hand before he pulled me flush against his very hard and very bare back. "You cannot kill a god, Adranus. You above anyone should know that." 𝐿𝐼𝐵𝑟'𝐬 sneered, his lips pulling into a sickening smile as I let go of my hand to wrap the huge arm securely around my back, keeping me pinned to his. "You should know by now. There are worse things than death." Chapter 38. Fear flashed through 𝐿𝐼𝐵𝑟'𝐬's gaze once again, the snide amusement falling away as Adranus slowly pulled away from me. "What was your goal in all of this?" He started softly, his voice a dark, somber drawl as those red eyes flashed against the darkness of the storm. "You kidnapped my 𝐶𝐴𝑟, tried to steal her soul, tried to kill her, and summon me to this god-forsaken pit. And for what?" His voice rose with every word, the fury in his eyes practically glowing as he stepped towards the thin creature before us. 𝐿𝐼𝐵𝑟'𝐬 took drastic steps back. To trap me, to steal my power, or hand me over to that insignificant prick who promised to return your position. The god shook his head, his dark hair falling across the beautiful face as he let out one dark, snide chuckle. The demons that tramping through the clearing had all but vanished, or had been completely destroyed by the wolf-borns. The storm was still rumbling overhead, but the lightning had finally faded. I didn't know what to do. Adranus didn't need my help, but I didn't want to run towards the trees, and I needed to find Eirik. I could live on this realm for thousands of years, and still have the power to destroy 𝐿𝐼𝐻 his best. "What do you think I will do to you?" I watched as the thin, traitorous man glanced around helplessly, searching for any demon that would come to his aid, but the few that were left scattered quickly into the dense trees. I wanted to squash the hope rising in my chest, but it was hard. All this mess was nearly over. Lord Adranus, let's talk about this. 𝐾𝐞𝐬 isn't hurt. Her soul is intact. No genuine harm was done. Adranus snarled, the sound vicious even though it passed from human lips. My stomach twisted at the ferocity of the noise. "You took my 𝐶𝐴𝑟. You are a fool if you did not see this coming." Those words were so simple, but spoken with such an intensity they made my stomach flip. His 𝐶𝐴𝑟, All sense of that earlier joy and composure had left the pathetic excuse of a man, and he began backing away from the god in absolute panic. "She's in love with King," he shouted in a stutter, those yellow eyes wide in fright. "They have slept together. You mean nothing to her now." His exclamations shot straight through my heart, like a sharp dagger piercing skin. "That's not true," I stammered as Adranus tensed, the muscles of his shoulders clenching with the pause. My breathing nearly stopped at the action. I was in love with Eirik, but that didn't mean the life Adranus and I had once shared was not true. I had loved him more than anything once. I still did. I think. But the last thing I needed to worry about were the two directions my heart kept tearing in. My words hung like a heavy cloud over our heads, and although the panic did not fade from 𝐿𝐵𝐸 face, a smug glint danced in his eyes at Adranus' hesitation. Then Immortal let out a slow, deep breath, and that smug glint in the seer's eyes disappeared. "Immerse is mine." He spoke low against the fading thunder, but every word was as crystal clear as the waters of the lower kingdom. "She will always be mine." Then he was suddenly crouching to the hard, cold ground, his red eyes glowing in the darkness as his hand curled into the damp earth. My brow pulled into a frown. What in the world was playing around in the dirt going to accomplish? But the panic was growing in 𝐿𝐵𝐸 eyes, and this time it was his breath that began escaping in hyperventilating pants. There are worse things than death. My dyes were drang throughout my mind as I watched the ground just a few lengths away begin to shake. My own eyes grew as wide as the moon as the earth beneath Adranus' touch moved and slowly turned to hard, corroded black as it crumbled in on itself, like a sinking sand pit with no foreseeable end. Oh my heavens! A jagged crack rippled through the ground underneath his hand, and broke along the earth's edge until it reached just beneath the seer's feet. 𝐿𝐵𝐸 was the nearest Eirik, his feet tripping against those long ropes as he rushed to get away from the breaking ground. But it was no use. "You should have foreseen this coming." Adranus' voice sounded around the entire clearing, the dark growl reverberating among the treetops like the eternal being he was. I watched him in awe, watched the power ripple from his hand, watched the way those red eyes darken like the night sky. It was a beautiful, terrifying sight. The jagged break in the earth continued to grow and fall away until a hole appeared just beside him. A black, endless pit that seemed to suck all air and life into its depths. I stood safely behind Adranus, away from the sucking winds of the void. But that didn't ease the fear shooting through me. Adranus. My voice was nearly unapalatable in the ripping wind of the void as he stood slowly back to his bare feet. But the small tilt of his head let me know he had heard. What? I didn't know what to say, or do. Did I try to stop this and save the seer's life when he would have so easily taken mine? Or let Adranus' power eat him whole? His time on this plane is over. Do not look if it upsets you. His voice was in my ear, in my mind, as if he were just beside me, bending down so I could listen, though he stood lengths away. It honestly did not surprise me. But he did not turn, or even cast a glance in my direction, and his words had been so cold. But I couldn't worry about that now. 𝐿𝐵𝐸 let out an earth-shattering scream, that whirlwind of chaos pulling at his robes as he lunged away from the void. I was shocked, stunned into a frozen state at the easiness Adranus seemed to radiate watching a man slowly be dragged into a lifeless, soul-sucking pit. "Do not worry," the god of the night growled, those red eyes nearly smug as he watched the seer grip helplessly at thin blades of grass. "Eerie will be joining you soon enough." "Adranus, please," 𝐿𝐵𝐸 begged, his eyes so wide they looked close to falling from his skull. But it was too late. That sucking wind had wrapped around his legs tightly and pulled him effortlessly into its dark depths. His ear-piercing screams drowned out the sounds of the wind. Oh my gods. I was nowhere near the voice, but I still stumbled away as the man I had come to fear over all others disappeared. He just disappeared. Adranus stood tall, proud even, right at the edge of the abyss, his red eyes gleaming mercilessly as he gazed down into its depths. the wind never even touched him. We both stood silently for a few long moments, watching that endless, earth-shattering void slowly disappear back into solid ground. The earth seemed to reappear and mend itself, that awful corroded black color disappearing back into brown earth and green grass. My eyes were wide in terror. Adranus narrowed in appeasement. The underworld. He had conjured a portal to the underworld. I remember watching him bring it before, but never so close. He stood there for a long, silent moment after the void disappeared, the tension in his muscles slowly easing as he let out a hard sigh. I never fucking liked that guy. I heard that dark voice snarl as he rolled his head against those thick shoulders. I was still too stunned for words. Just stood there in a gaping mess as he turned slowly to face me. Those red eyes were hard, an anger like no other shining against the darkness of the night. Even as he began to walk towards me, and that anger slowly ebbed away, there was no pleasing light shining from his gaze. He was, also, still 100% without clothes, and despite the shock my body seemed to be in, I was still able to blush every time my eyes dropped below his waist. He walked slowly towards me, that hard jaw set in stone as his eyes glanced carefully along my body, as if he were approaching a frightened deer. I probably looked like one. My dress was a torn and shredded mess, my hair as disheveled as the overgrown grass beneath our feet, and my eyes were wider than the ocean's reach. Definitely not how I wanted to appear for our reunion. I kept my eye focused on his face, on that hard gaze and stony jaw. He didn't seem to soften at all the closer he drew. He paused barely a foot away, his stature tall, proud, strong, as if there were not a shred of weakness in his being. Which was probably true. He was a god after all. Are you all right? The question, no matter the original concern its intention, left his lips in an icy snap. It made that painful ache from before rear its ugly head. Had I done something wrong? The memories I had of him were of such a loving, caring nature, but the Adranus before me, the one who left me in that cave and acted so coarse during the battle, seemed the exact opposite. Perhaps he truly had forgotten me. I could only wrap my barely covered arms against my stomach and give him a small nod. Words did not seem to breach my lips. This was definitely not how I expected any form of reunion to be. Then again, he did leave me before. He knew where I was ever since I found the stone, but did not come for me, and he was summoned to the clearing from my power. He did not have a choice in the matter. Maybe this was his choice, to be rid of me. Then why say all those things to 𝐿𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵? Why call me his star and make a big deal about my being taken? Or hurt? Why pretend to care if he did not? Why did it freaking matter? There were far more important things to worry about, like Eirik and the other generals. We had to find them, or I had to at least. He let out a small growl, one that had my eyes and attention snapping back to him. Thank you. I finally stammered as those ruby-red eyes of his glowed down at me impatiently. I wasn't sure if that was what he was waiting for, but if he needed a thanks to lose that glare, then so be it. I need to find Eirik and the others. My eyes flittered back out across the room and clearing. Blood and bodies scattered everywhere. My mind still felt a little foggy from witnessing that whole portal void thing, and if I stared at that unearthly beautiful face any longer, I feared I would do something he would obviously be repulsed by. Like hug him. I have to make sure they're okay, Immerse. I hadn't realized I had started to turn and walk away from him until one of those large, gruff hands reached out and gripped at my upper arm. I paused and blinked up at him, that fog in my mind barely clearing as the ruby against my chest seemed to warm, then fade again. What was wrong with that thing? I have to get you back to his castle. It is not safe here for you. His touch was warm, gentle even, but those eyes did not soften, and neither did that painful wrenching in my stomach. We stood there for a solid, silent moment, neither of us looking away, though the emotions in our gazes were very different. I could feel the crushing choke of mine. Why do? I started softly, then paused when nothing else left my lips. one perfectly dark eyebrow raised in question. Did I do something to make you hate me? I was surprised when the question finally fell from my lips, and dropped my gaze to his large, bare chest so he couldn't see the massive confusing, gut-wrenching emotions there. There was another silent pause, one long enough to make me wish I had never asked. If he truly did no longer want anything to do with me, it was cruel to ask him why. But I didn't understand the stinging in my eyes, or the tightness in my throat. I hated myself for wanting to cry. It was not the first time the person I thought I was meant to be with did not want me. I should have been used to it by now. But then there was a warm, wet breath sighing heavily into the crook of my shoulder as massively large arms wrapped completely around my upper body. I nearly squeaked when he squished me to his bare chest, expertly keeping me away from that lower half of his. I could never hate you, little star. I have, and always will, love you more than anything. My heart fluttered at his words, the fog in my head clearing some as he cocooned me against him. I could not move as he held me pinned tightly to his upper body, the warmth of his skin seeping into the cold expanse of mine. My hands and arms were pinned between his chest and mine, so I could not embrace him back even if I tried. But I couldn't complain. This was a feeling I had only dreamt about, one that sent warmth throughout my whole being. His arms squeezed around me tighter, then lifted me straight into the air as if I weighed nothing. What are you doing? I stammered in surprise as he began carrying me towards the tree line. I told you it is not safe here. I am taking you as far to the castle as I can. The storm overhead seemed to ignite once again at his words, those dark clouds and rolling thunder sounding around the entire mountain. But I have to find Eirik. He is here somewhere. And the others. They could be hurt. They are fine. Now stop squirming. He snarled into my ear, though I ignored him and tried to push away from that impossibly large chest. What if he needs me? I started in a panic, my breathing leaving in quickened pants as he began carrying me further and further into the trees, away from the clearing. And Eirik. The king is fine. I can feel them all. Stop making this harder on yourself. He growled into my ear, though I continued to struggle against his hold. I still need to find them. I need to find him, Immerse. He suddenly growled, the sound so hard it shook through even the tallest tree. I fell limp in his hold, but that didn't ease my worry. But then there was a flash of gold and brown fur flying past us, before another very without clothes man came barging through the trees. My eyes nearly bugged out of my skull. My lord. Turf panted out of breath as he fell to his knees before us and bent his large head to the ground. I kept my gaze anywhere but if without clothes lower half. Turf, I exclaimed in relief and tried to pull away from the overgrown buffoon again, though he only grunted and repositioned his hold on me. You're all right. He glanced briefly up at me, his golden eyes bright with the power of his wolf before he turned his head back to the ground. I've been looking for you everywhere. Lady 𝐿𝐻𝐬. His breathing quickly returned to normal, though his voice remained as professional as ever. She has been with me. I was so worried about you. I nearly shouted over Adranus's low-spoken words, my arms still pushing against his hard chest. Is 𝐿𝐻𝐬𝐬 okay? Are the others? Where's Eirik? Terry's gaze rose to blink slowly up at me, that bright light flickering between mine and the god who refused to set me down. Adranus grunted, those massive arms tightening further the harder I pushed against them. I let me go. I grumbled and was very close to slapping at his shoulders until he did. If we'll find them. Stop fighting me. That dark rumble of his was more annoyed than anything, but I did not let that faze me as I twisted harder against him. No, I need to find him. I need him. There were suddenly tears pricking my eyes. Tears I didn't understand, but they clogged my throat and made speaking nearly impossible. Adranus let out a long, disgruntled sigh, his large chest moving against mine with a sullen motion. Do not cry. He practically growled as those large arms slowly lowered me to the cold, snowy ground. I am sorry. It's just been a stressful day. I gave him a sheepish smile, water still clouding my eyes, although I refused to let them fall. He was with me, the man, the god, who had haunted my dreams since I found that stone, and it made the power inside of me, my soul, beyond happy, but at the same time it was yearning for Eirik. I wanted to freaking scream. Red eyes stared hard down at me, nearly glaring as strong arms gripped tightly at my upper arms. 𝐿𝐢 stayed silent on the ground beside us, his head still bent to the earth. There was an intense moment of silence. Either one of us seemed eager to break as his grip slowly eased and his thumbs began to rub soothing circles into the bare skin revealed through my tattered dress. Then that hard, intense gaze softened before flickering back towards the dark, storm-invested clearing. It is truly not safe for you here, but I will find him if that eases you. Go back to the castle with 𝐿𝐢, but do not argue with me on this. His eyes shot back to mine, that softened look disappearing before he turned towards the kneeling general. Take her back to the castle. I will find the king. 𝐿𝐢 stood slowly to his feet, his head still bowed to the ground as Adranus's eyes flickered back to mine. Of course, my lord. Those golden eyes soft for once as they flickered between us. 𝐿𝐢's gruff hands were gentle as they still gripped my upper arms, those hard eyes disappearing into a far sadder gaze. It made my heart clench. That could not have been a good look, and it made fear spark in my stomach. Why do I feel like I am never going to see you again? The words passed my lips in a hoarse whisper, one that honestly hurt my throat. We had been kept apart for hundreds of years, and despite that he said he would always love me, he never came for me, and now he was sending me away. A small, sad smile pulled at his lips, at the lips that used to laugh and kiss me with such tenderness it would make my head spin. Those were all memories now, that Adranus was gone, that Immerse was gone, and what was left were to complete strangers. We will meet again. Trust me. I hate when you say that. His chest suddenly vibrated with a low chuckle, one that shook through me as he leaned down to press a soft kiss against my forehead. I stood frozen, my heart taking as his large hand left my arm to press against the ruby still hidden beneath my tattered dress. I gasped at the sudden heat that surged through the stone, at the feeling of life that pulsed through it once again. I will always find you. My little lich, my little Immerse. Chapter 39. It had been hours since 𝐿𝐢 had escorted me back to the castle and practically locked me in the king's room. My nerves grew with each passing minute. There had been no sight of Adranus or Eirik, and it only made the unease inside me grow. He was okay. I knew he was. I could feel that he was, but that didn't stop my worry. And Adranus. He had left as fast as he appeared. That white, hot lightning bolt of awareness that shot through me at his presence had completely disappeared, even though the stone pressed against my chest strummed with warmth. What is happening? My voice came out as an airy whisper as I let out a long, tired sigh and slowly lowered myself into the armchair in front of the fireplace. A servant had entered when 𝐿𝐢 first locked me in the room, but I had waved them off. I was way too anxious to sit comfortably in a fire's warmth. I hadn't even changed out of my shredded and mud-soaked dress. 𝐖𝐴𝐲𝐼𝐻 had been waiting for us at the entrance of the castle when we returned, a terribly worried frown plastered on his face, one that eased some when he saw us. He and 𝐿𝐢 had stayed behind in case I managed to return before the others had found me, and I was beyond relieved at the fact. That was 3 generals I knew were okay, which only made my nerves for Eirik grow. Where was he? I was exhausted, and sitting down only made matters worse. The weight of the day was pulling heavily at my shoulders, and all I wanted to do was curl up in the comfortable chair and sleep for days. But Eirik was back, and I wanted to be awake when he was. Adranus had promised to find him, but I knew that look in his eyes when he turned from me, a look of pure sadness. He was coming back, and my heart didn't know how to handle the fact. The room was cold, and darkness shone from the clouded windows. The ominous apprehension of the space matched the ache in my chest, and I was so very tired. Immerse. The voice was soft in my ear, nearly as gentle as a warm caress on my cheek. My heavy eyes blinked open. A warm orange glow shone slightly from the fireplace in front of me, heating the cold numbness that had fallen over my entire body. Eyes bluer than any gazed carefully over at me. Their owner crouched half, without clothes, in front of my curled, tattered from on the chair. The hard ball of stress and anxiety that had weighed heavily in my stomach even as I slept instantly eased. Eirik. Relief swamped through me, though his eyes were soft and his touch gentle. There was a disgruntled frown pulling at his lips, but I didn't care. I was relieved to pay much attention. "You're all right," I exclaimed in sheer happiness and couldn't stop myself from quickly reaching over and throwing my arms around his thick neck. For some reason, unknown to me, tears filled my eyes and he sighed into my hair as my arms squeezed tighter around him. Large. Their arms wound slowly around my back and drubbed soothingly down my tattered dress. "Yes, I am all right," he grumbled into the crook of my shoulder, strong fingers curling tightly into the ends of my hair as his other hand continued to soothe along my back. He thankfully was wearing cotton pants, though my eyes were mainly drawn to the quickly healing scars on his chest and back. He had gotten hurt. "I was so worried about you." I breathed into his shoulder, those rotten tears trying to clog my throat as I buried my face into his skin. The heat from the fire was nothing compared to the warmth he radiated. He let out a dark, unamused, nerve-bringing chuckle, one that didn't settle well in my stomach. "Let's not talk about who was worried about who tonight. It will not end well for you." The water in my eyes slowly faded, even though a small frown took their place as I pulled away from his embrace, though those arms of his wouldn't let me get very far. "Do not be mad at me. This was my fault." Those blue eyes narrowed, that soft look hardening as his hands wrapped around me once again. He let out a disgruntled scoff before pulling me back into his chest, the ruby humming loudly between us. "I am not mad at you." He grumbled into my hair before squeezing me tightly and slowly pulling me from the armchair. His voice was dark and gruff, but that didn't stop him from pressing a soft kiss to my neck or stop the hot floating feeling from surging through me. "Just at the situation. I'm beyond relieved that you are all right." He sighed into my ear, his tone easing as those arms tightened around me. I didn't even realize that I had reached up to let my fingers run through his dark, matted hair until he buried his face into the crook of my shoulder. I held on to him tightly for another moment, curling my fingers into the hard skin of his shoulders. I never wanted to let go of him again, but I had to. There was so much I needed to as him, needed to know. I eased slowly away from him, despite the small growl pulling at his lips. "Where were you?" "I knew you were in the clearing, but I couldn't find you." I was so worried. His eyes were soft again, though his grip remained firm as he kept me from stepping away. I enjoyed the contact. I truly did, but I was way too anxious to stand still. "I was trying to get to you." The blue in his gaze turned icy, his grip hard as his attention seemed to waver back to the battle only a few hours ago. But there were more of those demonic fucks than I had thought. He paused for a moment, his eyes scanning my face as his thumbs rubbed soothing circles into my arm. "I knew you were okay, though," he murmured softly, the color in his eyes darkening despite the warmth radiating from them. He always left me more confused than ever, but I knew he was talking about 𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻. He knew the god had found me, had saved me, like always. He somehow knew. I was so sure how that made me feel. I bit at the corner of my lip and glanced away. 1,000 rather depressing thoughts ran through my head. Had Adranus found him? Had they actually spoke? Why hadn't he come back for me? He left me again. He always does. But Eirik was here and the 1,000 loving emotions I had for the wolf, born king, overloaded my heart. It was infuriating being torn into completely different directions. Where's Adranus? I stammered a silent moment later, too afraid of the expression on his face to meet his gaze. It was honestly pointless having hope for the god. The more my memories of the life we had returned to me, the more I became aware of that promise he always made, the one he was never able to keep. He would always find me. He lied. North was silent for a moment after that, his thumbs ceasing their gentle circular path on my arms. I wanted to flinch as his hands pulled away. At the absence of his warmth, it was only a matter of time before he got irritated at the connection I had with the god. 𝐻ES gone. I didn't want to look up into his eyes, to see the look there when I asked what he meant by gone, but I didn't have to. The unspoken answer was reflected in his tone. For good. Adranus was gone for good, was all that would pass my suddenly dry lips, my stomach dropping to my feet. The ruby heated against my chest, and my heart wanted to cave in on itself. I knew he would leave, no matter how many times he promised he wouldn't. Even when he threw away his place in the heavens to find me, it mattered little when he actually did. What was wrong with me? There had to be something about me that always drew him away. He left me in the heavens, in the cave, at the clearing. It was a constant. Immerse. I nearly jumped Erik's voice, and my eyes wide and in surprise as his hand reached over to run soothingly down my arm once again. I had been so lost in self-pity I hadn't noticed the deafening silence that had fallen over us. I finally raised my eyes to his bright gaze, only to meet a blue washed in such a pitying sorrow it tore at my heart more. Eirik. Did they actually talk? Was that why he left? If he figured out about the ginormous fucked up mess inside my head, I wouldn't blame him for leaving. Hell. I wanted to disappear half the time too. Don't cry. Little Immerse. I hadn't actually realized I was until he mentioned it. The tears small and silent though his voice came out as 𝐊𝐢𝐬. I stood still as his large hand reached over and wrapped into my hair, pulling me into the safety of his chest. I curled into his warmth, relishing in the solid man. He might not have loved me, or wanted to be around me, but he always came back, and I could not help the love I felt for him, no matter how upset he made me. Am I not enough for you? He suddenly murmured into my ear, his voice hoarse even though his touch was soft as he rubbed down my back. Can you not be happy living a long life with me? I forced that ridiculous sadness away, forced the tears back down my throat as I wrapped my arms tightly around his waist, my face buried into the crook of his neck. For a while, that was all I would ever dream of. The hope that one day you would love me as much as I love you. I didn't care about admitting my feelings out loud just then. Too much had happened to make a big deal of it. And I was worn out, exhausted and dirty. I didn't have the mental capacity to be around the bush. His whole body tensed, his hand stopping that soothing stroke along my spine before easing me slowly away from him. And now, do you not want the same thing? His gaze was hard as it searched mine, his jaw tense as I tried to run my fingers through my knotted hair. I want. I stammered miserably as I tore my gaze from his, my tongue licking my dry lips as I wound my arms tightly around my waist. Those blue eyes stared holes into the side of my face, begging me to look up at him just long enough to fall under his spell. There was no point in hiding the truth now. I never want to live without you. His blue eyes flashed in the dimly lit light of the fireplace. That sadness from before had completely disappeared from his gaze, and I wanted to smile at the small one tugging at his lip, but there was too much turmoil raging through me to manage one. I had to glance away before speaking again. I didn't want to see the expression that would fall over his face. It would only make this harder. But that does not mean I can stop caring for Adranus. I whispered miserably to the floor, my chest squeezing impossibly tight around my heart. Can you live with that? Eirik, I asked softly, my hands wringing nervously together before I dared to glance up at him. Can you try and fall in love with me knowing that he will always have a place in my heart? His smile faded, just as I feared it would, and his eyes flashed in that unnatural light that always made my stomach churn in nerves. What would happen if he turned away from me? I could not go back to the village. It was never my home. I never had a family, a place. Would I even want to try without him? I lost Adranus a long time ago, and now I would lose the closest person I had to a family. Was there really a point after that? Immerse. North's voice was hard, his gaze icy as his head lowered to mine. his jaw clenched impossibly tight. My eyes widened at the look in his, and I had to stop myself from stepping away from him as he lowered his head to mine. "You keep talking as if I do not already love you," I gasped when those strong fingers of his reached up and gripped tightly at my chin. "I know that is my fault, but it's really starting to piss me off." Eirik, but I couldn't say anything else. I was too shocked at the sudden proximity to form any rational thought. Blue eyes flashed in the darkness, and his grip on my chin tightened as his free hand pulled me back into his embrace. I had to swallow a gasp when his lips brushed just barely over mine. It was a kiss, but it was the closest thing to one he had ever given me. "You have owned my heart for an eternity. Immerse. I have always loved you. I will always love you." I barely had time to process what he was saying, to relish in the words I had been dying to hear for months now, before that grip around my waist pulled me flush against him, and those lips that had only ever kissed my forehead or hand before fell over my own. I was so surprised I could only stand there in shock as his arms wound tightly around me, his grip moving to my hair. The bright electric tingles that shot from his lips to mine and throughout the rest of my body made me question any doubts I had ever had about us. I just started getting used to the fact that he was kissing me, my eyes finally closing and my mind turning in absolute mush. When he pulled away, those bright, blue, unearthly eyes 3 shades darker. I couldn't say anything as he pulled away. My head was spinning far too much. "There's something you need to see," he murmured softly before reaching for my hand. I could only nod in a daze as he lifted my palm to his lips and pressed a warm kiss there. Then he stepped away from me, that smoldering look in his gaze quickly turning to one of worry as he held tightly onto my hand. "I really do love you. My little Immerse. More than anything." His voice was so sure, so confident, that I almost missed the anxiousness falling over his gaze. He was getting nervous. He gave my hand one last squeeze, his eyes almost sad, before letting go and taking a step away. I frowned as he walked around the armchair towards the darkness radiating through the large windows. That worried look in his eyes only grew. "Eirik?" I asked softly as he paused at the windowsill, his large hands visibly shaking at his sides. The daze his kiss had put me under was finally lifting, but unease was quickly taking its place. "What's going on?" He ignored me though and glanced out the window towards the sun finally starting to rise along the edge of the mountain. I watched nervously as he licked those lips of his and let his hand run through that thick, dark hair. "He will never leave you alone. Adranus. He will never go away." He seemed to murmur more to himself than to me, but his eyes still flickered back to mine. His words made my heart drop to my stomach. I had lost Adranus a long time ago. He had made it quite obvious how he felt about me. What he wanted from me, nothing. Eirik did not have to worry about him. "You're wrong. Age is gone. You said so yourself." North let out a humorless scoff and rolled those blue eyes as if my words were nothing but nonsense. "He was. Believe me." He snorted, and I narrowed my eyes. "Do not mock me, Eirik. I can't handle that right now. I would never mock you. Then don't pretend to know what he wants." It seemed like such a dumb matter to be upset over, but I lost a part of me every time I left, and knowing that everything we had once shared could never be again hurt. No matter how much I loved North. "I am Adranus." I said don't. I was myself right then. It had just been an incredibly long and stressful day. I never would have snapped at him normally, but now I was furious and did not want to discuss Adranus. North knew how I felt, knew this would take time for me to get over. I practically told him that, and yet he thought it was funny to throw that in my face. Just because a part of his soul was Adranus didn't mean he understood what was in the god's head. I turned from him and began to stomp angrily away from the sitting area and warmth of the fireplace, the heat of his kiss completely forgotten. I just needed to rest for a while and not have this discussion until I was myself again. "Immerse." Eirik suddenly snarled and, despite the furniture separating us, was at my side in a blink. I refused to acknowledge him, though he didn't need me to when he wrapped that heavy hand of his tightly around my arm and spun me to face him. "I am not mocking you. You infuriating girl," he growled in my face, his grip almost painful as he pulled me against him. "I am Adranus." Red suddenly flashed across his eyes, completely devouring the blue that I loved. His jaw was set in a hard line, his breathing leaving his chest in hard growls as he held my arm tightly in his grasp. I gasped, my arm going limp in his grip as that ruby-red gaze bore holes into my own. The stone pressed against my chest flared to life. "Teeth, that's impossible." I stammered like a fool as his grip on my arm slowly eased, the hard expression in his gaze softening. There was a pause. One long, tense pause before my mind completely exploded. I saw you. Adranus had a completely different body and wolf. They were ginormous. I know it was't you. I was in near hysterics, shaking my head viciously and staggering away from the supposed wolf, born king as he let go of my arm. He frowned, that worried look from before coming back in full force as I stumbled backward to the nearest wall. I pressed my back against the hard wall of his chambers. At the only stability I had that moment. This couldn't be. I know what I saw. Those red eyes flashed. The sun glowing slightly outside the window darkened. And that blue energy I had once believed to be Eric's own power swirled around him. In a blink it was gone. And so was North. No. I was shaking my head viciously as Adranus stood barely a few feet away. That intense gaze of his gone and replaced with sad remorse as he watched my mind cave in on itself. He tried to step forward, to reach out for me, but I shook my head and pressed my back harder against the wall. That horribly sad look in his eyes only grew as I flinched away from him. I didn't. He started softly, his large hand reaching up to run through that dark hair. "I didn't want you to find out like this. You lied to me." I gasped as he tried to take another step towards me. You lied to me. For months. He had known all along. Ever since the first moment he saw me on that rooftop. He knew who I was from the beginning, and he let me spend months going completely and totally insane. I didn't have a choice. Of course you had a fucking choice. I didn't care whether or not I sounded like a lady at that moment. My mate, the one person who was supposed to be the world to me, who I was supposed to trust completely, had lied ever since the very beginning. Oh my God. I snapped and pushed away from the wall to pace angrily beside it. I was way too worked up to think about anything rationally. To let him explain. You knew all along. You knew. And yet you watched me suffer for months. I snapped as those red, otherworldly eyes watched me pace angrily. You knew everything I was dealing with and you ignored it. I was too busy angrily pacing to notice that blue energy return and change him back to Eirik. I didn't ignore it. Immerse. Please stop. Let's talk about this. But I didn't want to stop. To talk about it. I was so furiously angry I just wanted him to feel all the hurt I had felt throughout everything. Through the isolation, the pain, the fear, all that time spent worrying about the gold tower, about going insane over all that star business, of 𝐊𝐼𝐸 trying to turn me against him. That's when a string of horrible thoughts hit me all at once, thoughts that completely tore at my heart in every possible way. He had been on the mountain for years before I had ever woken in that cave, living as the wolf-born king, a king that hardly ever left his castle unless it were matters of war of the kingdom. He had stopped looking for me, and not only had he stopped looking for me, he had been with other females. The king does not keep his affairs around for long, much less have one of his generals escort them. You must be something of an extraordinary bed. Oh gods, I was going to be sick you. You have been here. For all these years. My stomach felt like it wanted to crawl out of my body and bleed on the ground, dragging my heart with it. Those blue eyes held such a strong remorse, but nowhere near as bad as I felt. This was all his fault. I never stopped loving you. Immerse. Then I lost it.